I will do that. So that's why I've got to be real careful if I get it. I'll know the end of April, if I get it. I just felt really good about it. So I'm hoping that that's a good sign. And the one that I got back earlier in the year, the $330,000 grant for 2 years, it piggybacks on that. It's just going to allow me to take that grant opportunity to another level, having one more person to help me with some things. So,
Oh, that'll be good.
I'm excited. And, I'm looking at the fact that if I can get the right person in there, I'm just looking at ways that after 2 years that, that it doesn't have to go away, that we can continue doing the services that we're doing and spread them out more in the county if we can. So we'll see.
That sounds great.
I'm having fun.
Well, it sounds like you are. You're working hard.
But I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It's a challenge, but I'm enjoying the challenge.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's great. I talked with Dr. Sanders, or she emailed me back, and she's going to do her class at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. But she said that, that she would not expect me to be at those classes. She wanted me to hold other classes to help them with their evidences 2 or 3 times. So I need to, as soon as you get your syllabus done, if you would share it with me, that will give me an idea of where I need to be with them.
I'll try to go through and pull some things tomorrow and just send it so you can at least start looking at some stuff.
All right, that sounds good.
Actually, Dr. Stone sent something. I'll look at it. I've got some things I can send you tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
You'll get full access of my class once it has been completed, the transfer over and all that stuff. I'll make sure you've got full access to it. Okay.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Well, it's 7:01. We need to get started. I just want to welcome everybody and to say I hope you had that you had a great weekend, and that that this week that you've already started off to a good week. It's Tasha and I were talking, and that we're in week 11. We're at as if I don't know any of you, that most of you are too young to know. In the days I had to work in the tobacco fields or whatever, we into short rows now. That's what we used to call it. Whenever I had to crop on foot for a while, but we were in the short rows, and that's where we are now, in the short rows, and got a lot to do over the next few weeks, and that's what we want to talk about tonight. But Dr. Revis, if you would bring greetings.
Good evening and welcome, and I hope you had a good time working on that AAPTEL. I was able to review everyone's work that got it turned in on time, and had some really good literature reviews, some in-depth information, and some really good writing. So I appreciate your work on that. I think most everybody was able to identify their walkthrough instrument. Most of you had them already in your school, so that was great. And then a survey instrument. So good job on your task 1 of the AAPTEL. Of course, some of you have some revisions to make, and that's okay. That's what this process is all about. But glad that we are down where we are on the AAPTEL task 1.
Right, and while we're there, let's just go ahead and camp out there for just a minute, Dr. Revis.
Okay.
All of my students turned their task 1 in as well. I did have to send a couple back because of just remember that with prompt 2 of task 1, that you're doing 2 things. That you're creating. You've got to put the walkthrough instrument in there, and you've got to talk about it, and you've got to validate it. If it's one you used in your school, then you just got to say this is what my district uses or my school uses. Plus, remember, you have to do the survey. And we said that your survey would be based on pulling information from your teacher working conditions survey or from advanced ed or Cognio, whatever you call it, or something of that nature. So just be reminded of that. I think the ones that have got to fix that, I've given you clear instructions on that. And I would advise you, take advantage of the fact that you're looking at your peers' work. When it goes in there, I mean, if you're doing something, don't understand something, that is a perfect time to look at how, well, oh, that's what it means by that. It's perfectly okay to look at that and to realize that you need to do something differently. So just make sure that many of them are already, the peer reviews are coming in, Dr. Revis. About half of mine have already completed their peer reviews for the AAPTEL. Just don't shortchange yourself, and don't, some of mine look like college dissertations. Some of them, you're getting by the skin of your teeth, and I don't like it when you get by the skin of your teeth. That's not a good practice as an administrator to do that. So, step up your game and give Dr. Revis and me what we know you can do and what we expect you to do. We're going to talk about, and with that being said, we're not going to talk about task 1 anymore, other than to relate it to task 2 and task 3 when we get there. But if you need Dr. Revis and me, then you reach out to us and we will address you individually if there is an issue with task 1 that you need for us to address at this time. This evening, we're going to look at just a review of task 2 very quickly. We're going to introduce task 3 again, and then we're going to introduce the case study that will be due next week. Just a reminder, complete the School of Ed dispositions and task stream. It's a little thing, but all these little things add up at the end of the semester with it going by so quickly if you don't go ahead and take care of it. And then just a reminder you need to make sure that you're working on those 12 competencies from the AAPTEL for your competency folio. Dr. Revis, I have not seen many, and I don't know if you have or not.
No, I haven't. And when you work on them, when you submit them for review, be sure to shoot us an email, because we're not always getting the automated notifications.
And I want to remind you, when you send them, do not just submit everything. You have to identify the specific competencies you want. When you don't do that, all 21 competencies show up that we have to review. And guess what Dr. Revis and I have to do? We have to open every one of them up. We have to make a comment no matter what. We have to say there is nothing to review. Do you realize that if everybody did that, how much time that we would waste? And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a pretty easygoing person, but after a while, I get aggravated and I might start saying some things that I don't like to say if I have to keep doing something, that's not necessary. So please take your time and think about what you're doing before you submit something. Just a reminder, in the yellow, this is also in your Blackboard, but I just want to remind you, these are things that are due this week and what's coming up next week. Just look at it. This week, week 11, by Sunday at 9 o'clock, task 1 of the AAPTEL is due to Dr. Revis and me for your final grade. The AAPTEL task 1 Zoom conference link that you do with your group, your Zoom group, is due by the end of this week. And remember, we said, talk about the AAPTEL process. Now, we will have talked enough about, task 1, task 2, and task 3, and you know what task 4 looks like, that look at the whole process when you're talking about when you're doing your discussion with your Zoom team this week. Also, your task 1 peer reviews are due by this coming Sunday. I would encourage you, go ahead and get this over with, because if you wait until Sunday or Saturday, it's really not doing the person any good, because most people are trying to go ahead and get task 1 completed so that they can turn it in and focus on the next task. So get this done. I would encourage you by tomorrow at the latest, please try to have your peer reviews done for out of consideration to everybody. Task 2 of the AAPTEL that we're going to remind you of tonight, the review part of it is due to Dr. Revis and me by Sunday. This is for your period instructor review. And again, we're going to go over that just a reminder of some things very quickly with task 2. Now let's look at this. This is what is due this week. Let's look at next week. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because you see that's week 12. Time is running out. Task 3 of the AAPTEL is due to Blackboard peer review for our review next week. And then you will turn task 2 in after you have revised anything that needs to be revised. You will turn it in next week for a final grade. Plus, we're going to introduce case study 2. So you'll be getting together with your team again next week to do your case study 2 that we're going to go over this evening. Just a reminder again, we're not coming together on Thursday nights. However, if you need Dr. Revis or me about anything, feel free to reach out to us. Dr. Revis, anything that you want to say at this point before we move forward?
No, it's really intense right now, but just keep up the pace for 3 more weeks, and then you'll be able to slide into home plate pretty easily.
That's right. That's right. Just a
If you
reminder,
keep
week
up the pace.
11. Yeah, week 11, just make sure that you're doing your readings and that you're applying your readings to the work that you're doing. Again, Dr. Revis has already done a great presentation on the gap analyses and the needs assessments. You're going to be focusing on that a lot. And if you'll look under the AAPTEL template and materials, there are actually some more information that you can get that will help you with a better understanding of the gap analysis and the needs assessment. If you click on this link right here, this actually contains a full explanation of the needs assessment process. So I would highly encourage you, as you're completing and doing your work for task 2, to look at that and get an understanding of what the needs assessment process is. We are going to move forward, Dr. Revis. I'm going to pull up the, let me do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to pull up, Dr. Revis, have you got your helpful hints document in front of you?
I do.
Okay, I'm going to pull up, let me see whose I want to pull up. Let's pull up. It doesn't matter. Let me pull this one up. We'll pull up Kayla's from last semester. Let's go to task 2.
Okay, so remember in task 2, you're going to take those 2 instruments that you identified, and you are going to implement the survey, and do your walkthroughs. So,
okay, here it begins. Okay, that was and again, we had students to do a disclaimer last time, and it's okay if you are in the same situation and you have had to work completely virtual, then you need to provide a disclaimer in there, based on whatever your situation is. And you need to just talk to us about how you had to do your walkthroughs. If it was a virtual walkthrough, you just need to explain that information in there. So it's okay to do a disclaimer if your circumstances were a little bit different. Okay. Okay, there we go, Dr. Revis.
Okay, so in task 1, you're really talking about your analysis and gap analysis of your survey in task 1, prompt 1. Task 2, prompt 1. So you're taking the research that you did in task 1, and you're going to talk about how your findings aligned or didn't align, or what kind of gaps that you have identified from your survey results. So, it talks about, through my observations, conversations I created and shared, and if you'll scroll on down, Dr. Simmons, she gets into, or should get into, a little bit about her survey. And you can see through my teacher empowerment survey, 100% of the staff completed and felt like they were recognized as educational experts. So you're telling the story of the results of your survey, and again, how that aligns to the research. So you take professional, results-oriented professional development. You know what the research says, and again, she's describing what her survey reveals.
Dr. Revis, and I just want to remind them again, these are the same 5 topics that you did in task 1, the same identical ones. The ones in task 1, remember again what Dr. Revis said, that it was research in task 1. Now you're actually applying the research.
Okay. Same thing with recruitment, placing, and mentoring. And don't be surprised if you see some results in your survey that says that believes that they need to have a stronger mentoring program for beginning teachers. Or don't be surprised if your survey comes back and teachers, a high percentage of your teachers report that they feel like they don't have input into the hiring process. So these are the kinds of things that you are going to report here under these individual topics.
Dr. Revis, I want to tell them too, it's okay if you look at your most recent teacher working conditions survey, or either your most recent advanced ed or Cognia in South Carolina, and in the most recent one, it says this, but you have new administration and your survey goes out and you get different results that don't necessarily align with what the most recent one said. That may be because things are moving in a better direction. Sometimes a change of administration does make a big difference. So, either way, if you see that things, or you may say that, do a comparison and say, that your survey results compared to the most recent advanced ed results or teacher working are very similar. You can make those kinds of comments with this. And a lot of times, it can make a big difference based on if you've had several people to retire and you've got a group of brand new teachers that are taking the survey, you can look at them. You may want to say, even in your survey, number of years of teaching experience, and you might see something there that the beginning teachers don't necessarily think like the veteran teachers or whatever. There's lots of things that you could look at. Okay.
Right. And then she gets into a little bit about mentoring program there. Again, she's talking about the teacher approaches to teacher evaluation. Into that a little bit. Look how she starts out that section by saying, according to my survey, 100% of the staff believe teachers are effective leaders in the school and have an appropriate level of influence on decision making. That's some really strong results.
It is.
Don't be discouraged if yours is not 100%.
Right.
Again, that's a gap that you would want to identify. So then impromptu is where you're really going to get more into the data that you collected in your walkthrough. Now, she starts out with a breakdown about years of experience in teaching, which is fine because I believe she asked for that, maybe even in her survey.
But you
But
see
she's,
how vital that information is in understanding survey results sometimes. So that is a good graphic to see as I move forward looking at the rest of her information, Dr. Revis.
and impromptu, you're going to want to have a lot of graphics, tables, pie charts, whatever, a lot of figures. Okay, and let's see what else she's done here. Okay, again, how long you've been teaching in the school.
Well,
Did it freeze up?
it's just won't there, and there we go. And then the next one.
My screen has frozen. I don't know if it's on my end or what. Can you take it from here?
I can. And then you see teachers have sufficient instructional time to meet the needs of all students. She's actually taken her survey questions and she has broken them down and she just did a true and false. And I want you to look at it. The blue, 73.3% of the teachers said yes, that they have sufficient instructional time to meet the needs of all students. The red section says no, that they do not. Now, again, it would be interesting to know if the red section were beginning teachers because they're having to learn so much and, they've got so much on the plate. However, it could be, you've got veteran teachers sometimes that get set in their ways and like the tree that's planted by the river water, I shall not be moved. And nothing's going to necessarily be right. So, but this is just an example of things that you can do. She just did lots of graphic information to explain her survey questions. But, and again, you can do bar graphs, pie graphs. Look at what she did with the Figure 9 comes from walkthrough data conducted and shared with me by my principal that illustrates what teachers were doing during the walkthroughs. And I want you to look at, this is just an excellent example of reviewing, 3.5%, sitting at desk, 14%, facilitating instruction, 22.1%, monitoring. This is great information. And then I want you to look at what they have done. They've talked about it. As shown by the graphic, during 38.4% of walkthroughs, teachers were lecturing or teaching. I mean, this is great information for an administrator to know what they need to do. Figure 10 is the breakdown of data from walkthrough conducted and shared with me by my administration, which shows the engagement levels of students in the classes being observed. When they went in there, I mean, look, she just great information. And again, you can, this is just giving you an example of something you can do. You can create your own story and your own graphics based on your own experience. It doesn't have to look like this, but I must be able to, to read your story, but I also must be able to see your story, if that makes sense. So you show it and then you tell us something about it. Does that make sense? What you've got to do? You talk about your experiences with the walkthroughs that you have done or you're going to be able to do. Again, remember, you are a teacher or you work at that school. So you have walked up and down the halls. This is a time, because you work there, it's okay to say, I observed the following, or I know the following because teachers talk to you. This is called qualitative research. And you know, when you ask questions or when they talk to you, listen, this is good information to provide. If there's a problem with administration, teachers talk about it, don't they? When they get together with people. Okay, it's the same thing. I know you have to be discreet and careful how you say things, but this is the time to point out if there are problems or issues. This is the time that you're to point it out, simply because you've got to put a plan in place later on. So you're talking about you're identifying the gap. Again, in task 1, this is what the research says. But in those same 5 areas, when I began to look at my school, the research says this is where we are. So guess what you've got to do? You have got to figure out how you're going to bridge the gap. That is what the gap is, the gap analysis. You're analyzing what is happening from here to here, from the research to what I see, what is happening. You've got to talk about it. You've got to get an understanding of it. Okay? Okay, any questions at this point about task 2, what you've got to do this week? Does everybody understand what you're doing? You're taking what you've done in task 1 and you're actually fully implementing everything and writing about it in task 2. Okay?
Dr. Stephen, I apologize, colleagues. My internet is unstable today, so I don't know what's going on.
No problem. We've gone through task 2.
Okay.
Dr. Revis, and that nobody had a question. I think that they have I really think that they've got a good understanding. Okay, Tasha.
So I did a really short survey for my survey in task 1. And after looking at some of the stuff that they're doing in this one, is it okay if I expand mine? I mean, I did like a 5 or 6 question survey, and I really focused on leadership and empowerment.
Yeah, you can always add to in task 2, and you can go back and revise task 1 again. Task 1 can be fixed all the way up until you submit the AAPTEL at the end. Okay. Okay. Good question though.
In the same lines that Tasha just had, a lot of my peer feedback is saying that my my survey is too long. Can I cut it down as needed?
Yes, you can. Go back and pull. How much have you got in it?
I think I have like 38 questions.
Go back and try to find 10 or 12 good ones.
Okay.
Okay. Let me do this now.
But I would add to that, make sure you're asking questions about teacher leadership and empowerment.
Do what? Yes, yeah, that's right, Doctor. Make sure that you pick, quality ones, things that are going to apply directly to what you think what the AAPTEL is about.
Yeah, Tasha, let me follow up with your question. You have the essential information. This person just collected a lot of information about years of experience, years at school, and all that stuff. I mean, I think what you turned in task 1 is fine.
Okay.
I wouldn't take the time to cycle back.
Well, I think Tasha overanalyzes herself anyway. I've learned that about her. Right, Tasha?
Yes.
And that's okay. I'd rather you do that and be sure than not. Dr. Revis, while I'm getting to task 3 in this example, go ahead and begin just kind of talking about task 3, and then we'll.
Okay. Hopefully I will not lose my internet connection. Well, guys, task 3 is just like what you did in task 4 of the AAPTEL. It is designing your action plan. And you're going to use the exact same template that you did in the AAPTEL. You're just now focusing on that teacher empowerment and leadership. and those instructional practices that you looked at. So, let's say, for example, that you had a high percentage of teachers that said that they didn't get much input on budget. So one of your strategies should be in your action plan about how you're going to address that as a school. For example, you may have gotten back on your survey that, as I stated an example earlier, about a high percentage of your staff say they don't have a lot of input on the hiring process. Well, what are some strategies as a school that your PLC is going to recommend to your leadership team and your principal to do in order to remedy that identified need, that gap? So, those are the kinds of things. And then when you look at your walkthrough data, I believe that last example that Dr. Stedman gave, the person reported that, oh gosh, I believe it was a high, well, not a high percentage, but higher than I would expect, percentage of teachers sitting behind their desk and not even interacting
Right.
with students.
But
And
that is great information to know, though.
yes, and so, there needs to be a strategy there. So
Right.
in task 3, you are going to pull together your PLC and you're going to share your data, and you're going to design a presentation to your administrative team and to your school improvement team, if possible. You may have to do that virtually, but if possible.
Well, Dr. Revis, and I want and just remember, you will see the term used back and forth, but the best way to look at task 3 is, it is an action plan, but let's call it a growth plan. It's more a growth plan, or it's more like it's like almost like a staff development plan, but it's a growth plan for improving teacher leadership in the school and in the classroom. That's what you're doing. Now, I want you to look at these. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 bulleted areas right here. Guess what? A vision for positive school environment. That's a heading. Guess what you've got to do? You got to do narrative work there. You've got to look at your school, and you've got to talk about, and this is where you can meet with your school, with your PLC. Your PLC can help brainstorm ideas for some of these things. So I would say that this is a good time to meet with your PLC again and to talk with them. But for each of these areas, a vision for positive school environment, you're going to put a plan in place. What you need to do is, right now, what is the vision of your school? What does the school environment look like at the school? And then what you're going to say, this is what it looks like. This is what it says. This is what it looks like. You're just going to very openly, candidly talk about your school environment. Now, and then at the same time, if there are issues there, if it's not what it needs to be, guess what? There needs to be a strategy in your growth plan for improving the school environment at your school. How is it going to be done? What are some strategies you're going to put in place? And that goes into the template that, where this is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do it. This is who's going to monitor it. And we'll talk about that. But you've got to narratively talk about that. Documentation to support identified needs. Again, you've got to go back and you've got to, you've identified needs in the school. What is out there? What can you and your team need to brainstorm? what kind of documentation is there to support those needs? You just didn't pull it out of thin air and say, you know, this is your walkthroughs may tell you something, or the principal's walkthroughs may tell you something. You know, the teacher working conditions survey is going to tell you something. That is documentation, valid documentation that's going to support the identified needs at your school. You've got to be able to work. It can't be just, well, this is what I think. You've got to back it up. Okay. A list of strategic indicators of success. How are you going to, you know, what strategies are you going to put in place to yield success? You're going to have short-term and long-term goals. Now, notice this one does not have midterm goals. It has short-term. What can you do now for a quick turnaround? There's some things that you could probably do immediately that would begin to turn, you know, to change the school environment. And then what are some things that it's going to take a little bit longer to do? You're going to identify them. And then activities to address, identify, okay, what are some of the things that you're going to do to make all of this happen? What are some of the activities? And again, we're not looking at one or two things. There should be several things, because this is a plan of action, a growth plan. Dr. Revis, would you like to pick up on the next part of it, a plan to communicate?
Sure. And the next section would be a plan to communicate progress with vital stakeholders. And you'll just narratively explain how you plan, or how the team plans to communicate the information and the progress that you're making along the way with the teacher empowerment and growth plan. You'll also narratively describe your timeline of activities. Of course, you've already identified some short-term and long-term goals and objectives. So you will take that and talk about the timeline of those activities. The next section would be narratively talking about your plan for gaining stakeholder involvement and buy-in. And as you've heard me say before, when we were talking about the AAPTEL, this is the hard part for administrators. To get buy-in and engagement and involvement on the part of our stakeholders. And then you will narratively talk about specific roles and responsibilities for carrying out this action plan. And lastly, there would be a section titled Formative and Summative Assessment Criteria. Now, let me go back here and reiterate. Formative assessment means how the principal or your school leaders are going to monitor the actions of the staff. And most of the time, that's going to be walkthroughs, formal observation, those kinds of things. The summative assessment criteria would be on your outcomes of the goals and objectives you identified.
Dr. Revis, I'm going to mute everybody. Unmute yourself again. Okay. Unmute yourself, Dr. Revis.
Okay, I think I have. Can you hear me?
I can now. There was background noise.
Okay. And so again, a lot of you had to go back and add that formative assessment piece in on the AAPTEL. So don't forget, underscore that part. That's about monitoring the adult behaviors in the implementation of your plan. Now, I would expect to see in this plan a lot of professional development. Okay, not only for things that things probably that came out of your walkthrough survey instrument or data collection instrument. And then there will definitely be some things that you have pulled out of your survey data that you're going to address as well.
This person has added a lot of graphics in their narrative work as well. She thoroughly explained everything. I'm trying to get to the
She did a little analysis of every
She did.
of this, yes, which you don't have to do, but make sure that your narrative work is aligned to what you've got in your growth plan.
Okay, I'll get there in a minute. She's just got a lot. She actually put her growth plan. We wanted in task 3, but she actually refers to it and puts it in her appendix. Yes, I want to come to it. This is her. While we're doing it, just remember that you've got a lot to do with task 3. You've got to develop your growth plan. You've got to share your growth plan with your administration, and then you have got to present your growth plan to a group of your peers. Now, you will have to decide how many of that. It may be the whole school. It may be your school improvement team. It may have to be, a select teachers that you can pull together based on what your circumstances are. But just remember, you need to show evidence that you have presented to your principal, and you need to show evidence that you have presented to,
There it is.
there it is, yeah. Yeah, I told you she has very extensive work, but you can see how she has identified the specific activities, the timeline, persons responsible, resources needed, short-term, long-term indicators of success. I mean, she's got all of her stuff in there. And then look at what she's done here. She's actually shown the slides from her plan that she's done, proving that she has presented. She's got pictures of her presenting. I mean, just lots of support. But again, everybody's growth plan is going to be different. Every school is different. So there will be no 2 alike that Dr. Revis and I look at and we read. No 2 will be alike in these growth plans. We will touch on this again next week, but some of you will go ahead and you'll get through with task 2 early, and you'll want to go ahead and get started on task 3. That's why we wanted to at least go ahead and introduce it to you, and that gives you a chance to, when you're coming together with your Zoom team, that gives you a chance to have some candid discussions about, questions that you may have as a team about the development of task 3 as well. But before we move on, who has a question at this point about what we've talked about task 3? Now's the time to ask us. Anybody? So everybody, you feel pretty comfortable that you know how to get started with that and what to do.
I asked in the chat, and this might just be a me only thing.
Okay, go ahead.
There's only 4 teachers in the whole school. And so I'm just worried if there's any teacher concern about the participation or any suggestions on how to present the material to the administration, because again, there's only 4 teachers. So survey results would be very easy to pinpoint.
But that's okay. What you're going to have to do, you're going to have to present it just as if you had 25 teachers at your school. If that's all you've got, that's all you can work with. So, and we understand that. So you need to clearly say that in your narrative work, what kind of school you have, and that you're the early college, right? Are you the early college?
Yes, sir. That's me.
That's right. I thought so. So just say that I'm an early college. We only have X number of students at the school. We only have one principal. You're a pretty new school too, right? Or you're the one that had a lot of changeover with administrators. I may have you wrong with somebody else.
No, we have the same administrator,
Okay.
but she's also the one that's very particular about everything I do lining up with her school goals.
Right, that's right. So listen, you know what you're dealing with, you know who you're dealing with, and just work with it to the best of your ability based on that. And just, and remember, I know you're not, none of you, I'm not going to tell you to put anything in there that would come back and would negatively impact you. But once you present it, just remember that the narrative work that goes in, it only goes to Dr. Revis and me. So you're okay after that, okay? Nobody else is going to know that but us, whatever you have to write in there after you've done your presentations. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, and if you need to reach out to Dr. Revis and me privately, feel free to call us, okay? Okay, Dr. Revis, anything else about task 3 before we move on to?
I think we're good on 1, 2, and 3. I hope we will come back to task 3 again and talk
Right.
about it more. But again, in your Zoom conference that you do this week, you're not just going to talk about task 1. You can talk about all 3 tasks.
Right, and even task 4 if you need to talk about it, because it's just the last non-competencies that you have not finished. And then the last thing that we want to do this evening is to take you, remember, you have next week will be your case study, and I'm trying to find my case studies, Dr. Revis. Here they are. You go back to case study materials, and you will go to case study 2. Dr. Revis, would you like to make any comments about what case study 2 should look like?
Okay. In the case studies is where we want you to really reflect back on the AAPTEL process. So it's a case study that aligns to the work that you're doing in the AAPTEL. And so we're going to want to hear the language of your AAPTEL. And, you know, in other words, you may say, well, I think the principal should have done da, 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 da. Well, why? Just because you think? No. Relate it back to some of the research that you've been doing that you just turned in this week for us. There's a lot of research that you dug into in those different categories there. So again, support your statements, support your conversations with research, with what you've learned in your research and in your readings from the course. Okay.
Now this is going to be, I love this case study. Now it is, this will require, if you do your homework like you're supposed to, you're going to, I mean, this can take you in many directions. It's deep. Donna is the principal. She scheduled a meeting with 5 of the most respected teachers in the building. She sent the committee members her agenda 2 days in advance and asked if they had any agenda items for the meeting. She indicated that she wanted to change the way the standard observations had been conducted in the past. She wanted teachers to be more involved in their own observations and to be more reflective about what they were teaching. Now, they have, I would call them, they've got their own PLCs based on grade levels in here. The dynamics of this is amazing. Look at the longevity of teachers. Look at control factors. Look at just look at all of this stuff, and you should really, you know, this is where you've got to work as a principal with this. But as you're reading this, you can kind of, you're a teacher, so you can think as a teacher with this. Think about people that you work with. Think about conversations that you've had, you know, in your own schools with teachers. But now remember, you're reacting to this as an administrator from a principal's standpoint. Now you're going to do the very same thing that you've done before. You're going to read it. You're going to read it. You're going to answer the questions in advance. You're going to decide as a team who's going to be the Zoom master. That link will be sent out. You will come together. It will be recorded. You will have a scholarly discussion based on your responses. And again, what Dr. Revis and I are going to be listening for is how well you work as a team, how well you speak the language that we are wanting to hear you speak, how well. You don't have to necessarily all agree on things, but I think at the end, what do you finally decide on, as a team? And it's okay to have, different viewpoints, at the end, but, come to a consensus and just talk about, this is how it ended for us. And then you're going to do two things. You're going to write about the actual, you're going to reflect on the experience, and you're going to talk about the case study itself, and what that case study says to you. Not regurgitating the case study all over again, but just talking about and relating it to what you've learned already from the AAPTEL and the AAPTEL. And then again, that is due week 12, so you need to go ahead and begin making plans for it. Now, I would say that when you meet with your Zoom team this week, that you go ahead, and that's a good time to go ahead and say, okay, Tag, you're it, or who's going to be the Zoom leader for this activity. Go ahead and set your date and time and go ahead and get it established for next week. Okay. Okay, any questions about this at this point? Let me stop sharing. Okay, any questions? Are you feeling pretty good about where you are with things now? I know it's a lot, but are you feeling can you think back to that first 2 or 3 weeks and then think about where you are now? Can't you see in your own self? Can't you see growth in your thinking? I can see growth in your work. So the writing that you're doing now is, for the most part, differently from the writing that you did week 1 and week 2. We can see the progression that it's supposed to take. And when you move into 603 in the summer, then I promise you that the hat that you wear this summer is going to take you in an entirely different direction in your thinking as an administrator. But everything that you've done up to this point will make it so much easier for you when you get with Dr. Lamb or whomever you're going to be with, in the summer. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, Daryl.
Going back to the competency folios, I requested comments, but I'm not for sure where to go at to see the feedback. I see that it's been reviewed, but I don't know where to go at to see the comments.
Okay, Dr. Revis, do you remember looking at Daryl's work?
Daryl, I do not remember looking at your work. Let me write myself a note. Does it say that you have received comments?
It just says that it was view request history, and it has 317, and then it has from Kathy Revis.
Oh, I guess I did then.
That's all, but that's all I see. I don't see any comments.
I'm assuming now, again, when we're dealing with task stream, Dr. Sebin and I cannot see what you see, but I'm assuming that you go back in to your competency folio and you can see our comments.
You can click on every one of them and whatever comments. Daryl, what I would suggest you do, reach out to Dr. Revis privately and let her look at that to see if, you know, if there's an issue or something that maybe she missed on her end. Just reach out to her privately about that.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Daryl. Is there someone else? Okay. Well, guys, it's been a good class. We're gonna let you go so you can get busy doing what you need to do. And we will see you next Tuesday. And if you need us before then, just reach out to us. And
Have a good evening.
Daryl, if you would send Dr. Revis an email and then just a phone number where y'all can communicate with each other.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you.
Good evening.